Born in northern Italy to Beatrice and Boniface, Matilda of House Canossa, Matilda of Tuscany, emerged with a glorious destiny before her. Her story begins to escalate rapidly with the death of her father. Beatrice then decided to marry her own cousin, Godfrey the Bearded, the Duke of Lotharingia. This marriage, however, wasn't approved by Emperor Henry III, and it became a source of conflict, and the emperor forced distance between the newlyweds in order to decrease their growing power. I'm sure it had nothing to do with Henry disapproving of cousin stuff. Matilda's brother died, year 1056. This placed House Canossa in a fragile position, with Matilda becoming the sole heir to its lands. To consolidate the family, Matilda was engaged to her stepbrother, Godfrey III, the Hunchback. The couple married in 1069, and it was not a particularly happy marriage, marked with sadness and death. They had one daughter, who bore Matilda's mother's namesake, Beatrice. Alas, young Beatrice died shortly after her birth and was the only child Matilda had, thus the last true child of the House Canossa. This situation put further strain on the relations between Matilda and her husband. They were separated not long after. During this time, Pope Gregory VII excommunicated the new King of Germany, Henry IV, for daring to question the Pope's authority. 4 days later, Godfrey was assassinated in 1076. Death by spear while answering the call of nature. During this entire time, Matilda and her mother began to jointly govern many aspects of Middle and Upper Italy. Beatrice eventually did pass away, but gave Matilda extensive lessons on how to operate as an effective ruler, just like Mother had. Matilda now found herself the undisputed ruler of large portions of Italy. But the excommunication of Henry was starting to cause major issues. As he was Matilda's second cousin, he had hoped that she and others might be able to assist in lifting said excommunication. As the Pope had told all of Henry's vassals, they were absolved of their oaths of fealty to him. This caused some conflict in the lands. Matilda, Henry's mother-in-law Adelaide, and the respectable abbot Hugh were to intercede on his behalf. After a long period of opposition to the idea, Gregory permitted Henry to appear before him at Canossa and atone for his guilt by public penance. Matilda, you see, while a vassal of her dear cousin and owed him her allegiance, she was a deep supporter of the papal reforms based around the Gregorian ideas of papal supremacy. So whenever the two powers were in conflict, she ultimately showed her support to the Pope. Over these years, that support was unwavering. She would donate wealth and soldiers, strike at the enemies of the church, and opposing the anti-popes that would manifest in the empire. In addition to this, Matilda would often offer refuge and protection to reformist clergy and laymen that did not fall in line with the emperor's vision. Beyond her known virtuous nature, Matilda was recognized for her military and diplomatic abilities. She was also hailed as a pious intellectual. Her letters are filled with attacks on the errors of the king at the time. She had a keen knowledge of the German language, but also could speak French and dictate in Latin. In 1088, Matilda found herself in increasing odds with Henry IV. She decided to head off a possible invasion with a savvy political marriage. Thus it was in 1089 that she married Welf V, heir to the Duchy of Bavaria. Despite the great age difference, she was in her 40s, he likely in his late teens, Matilda was dead set on this union. She sent thousands of soldiers to the border of Lombardy to escort her husband-to-be. The wedding celebrations lasted 120 days. These lavish proceedings were difficult for any medieval ruler to rival. Sadly, the young Welf feared his new wife to be a witch. He refused to share a bed with her, suspicious of various plots. On the third day of their marital bliss, she appeared before him naked and said, "Everything is in front of you, and there is no hidden malice." But the Duke was horrified, the reaction of which did not go well with Matilda, who struck him, spat in his face, and said to him, "Get out of here, monster. You don't deserve our kingdom, you vile thing. Viler than a worm or a rotten seaweed. Don't let me see you again, or you'll die a miserable death." But Matilda had more important things to take care of. With the advent of the First Crusade, Matilda began to make a variety of more aggressive moves. She made use of some French armies to assist in restoring Pope Urban II to Rome. Even after the end of the Crusade, she began a series of well-planned campaigns against Ferrara, Parma, Prato, and Mantua. These conflicts are said to have spanned between the years of 1101 to 1114. Her victory is seen as the result of careful planning and cunning, but also excellent aptitude with logistics. Her later years were filled with political machinations, pulp plots, and imperial decrees that we couldn't fit in this entire video. However, one major event of interest took place in the summer of 1114. Matilda had retired to Monteverzo. It was in the region of Mantua that the rumors of her death had begun to spread. The people began to celebrate as the Mantuans desired freedom from her rule, but as fate would have it, they discovered that Matilda was in fact still alive. In frustration, they burnt down her local seat of power, the Rivalta Castle. Had they only waited, silly, impatient peasants. As it was, her health was on the decline, and by 1115 she was no longer capable of traveling. Stricken, and in her final hours, she was tended to by a cardinal, the Bishop of Reggio. She received the final sacraments on the night of July 24th, 1115. It was so that Matilda had died from cardiac arrest. She was 69 years old. Her lands were quickly taken over by Henry V without much resistance. So ends the story of one of the most powerful women of the medieval era. How will you change the fate of this great leader? Follow along here for tales of more great leaders with the legends of CK3.